always a wild, loose kid in my neighborhood. I just always went for mine. I maintained myself. I knew how to hustle, and I definitely wasn't no punk.
These little running around like I wasn't brought up. I was brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight. You feel me?
There's always been a razor-thin line between hip-hop fame and real street respect. And one wild night in New York, Rod Diggs made sure Jim Jones felt exactly where that line stood. This wasn't some online rumor or fan-made story. This was the kind of moment that spread through every block, every barbershop, and every corner where people argue about who's really respected out here. Jim Jones was on top of the world. Dipset had the city on lock. Ballin was blasting everywhere, and he was walking like Harlem royalty. But Brooklyn? Brooklyn don't bow to nobody. That's where Rod Diggs entered the picture. His name already carried weight long before the industry knew who he was. Back then, Rod wasn't just a rapper, he was a street legend. A man respected across boroughs for how he carried himself. Ex-con or not, people recognized he moved with structure, power, and real loyalty. When someone mentioned Rod Diggs, voices got low. He had people who stood behind him, and he actually lived by the code most only talk about. So when Jim Jones started sliding through Brooklyn with that Harlem energy, talking bold and moving flashy, it didn't go unnoticed, especially not by Rod. Something was brewing that night, and everyone around could feel it coming. It all went down at a packed Brooklyn club, one of those flashy industry meets street type of nights where big names and real ones mix under the same roof. Jim Jones rolled up deep with his crew, dripped out in jewels, bottles popping, lights flashing, the full Harlem superstar vibe. He had the confidence, the aura, the shades, the swagger, but something in the air that night just didn't feel right. People say it started over something small, maybe seating, maybe bottles, but the tension got real quick. Turns out, the guys Jim's team clashed with were tied to none other than Rod Diggs. Within minutes, word reached Rod, and when he showed up, the whole club shifted. The music dipped low. People moved aside. The vibe got heavy fast. Rod didn't need to say much. His presence said it all. Witnesses swear you could feel the air change when he walked in. Calm, collected, but carrying the kind of weight that made everyone straighten up. He looked at Jim and said, "You good, homie? You know where you at?" Straight to the point, no performance, no ego. Jim tried to stay cool, but Rod wasn't there for the cameras or the fame. He made it clear, respect goes both ways. Everyone watching knew this wasn't some rap argument. It was a real-life check, power meeting pride, and the wild part? Jim didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't make a move. He just nodded, trying to cool it down. Rod gave a short look, turned around, and walked out like nothing ever happened. But that silence afterward, it hit hard. Like everyone just watched a star get reminded he's still standing in another man's city. To really get why that moment hit so deep, you gotta understand who Rod Diggs really was. Born Ronald Heron, he wasn't some rapper pretending to be street. He was the definition of it. He came straight out of the Gowanus houses in Brooklyn, one of those places where you either learn how to survive or get left behind real fast. Rod's name was already known way before he ever touched a mic. By the time he started rapping, his rep in the borough was solid. People knew not to test him. When he talked, folks didn't just listen because he rhymed well. They listened because he meant every word. He stood for that old school New York code, the kind built on loyalty, respect, and structure. Something the city started losing when fame began running the game. So when Rod Diggs and Jim Jones finally crossed paths, it wasn't just two artists bumping heads, it was two worlds colliding. Harlem Flash versus Brooklyn Discipline. Jim came with that Dipset energy, loud, confident, shining bright. But Rod was Brooklyn raw, calm, militant, focused, no fake smiles. That night, all that Harlem shine couldn't outshine Brooklyn's respect game. The truth is, Rod wasn't looking to start drama. He was setting the tone. Word spread that Jim's people had disrespected locals, tossing cash and acting like they ran the spot. Rod showed up to make one thing crystal clear. This ain't your block. This is mine. And in that moment, every person in that club understood exactly what real presence looked like. That encounter spread through the city like wildfire because everybody who witnessed it told the same story. Rod Diggs didn't yell, didn't flex, didn't throw a single threat. He just checked Jim calmly right there in front of everybody. And that calm confidence, that's what made it legendary. He didn't need to raise his voice to own the room. His silence said everything. People swore Jim's whole energy shifted after that. The swagger slowed down. The Harlem talk quieted up. He knew exactly what kind of room he was standing in. No punches, no chaos, just pure dominance through presence. That night became street folklore. The night Brooklyn humbled Harlem, even if just for a second. From there, whispers started spreading across boroughs. Jim got pressed by Rod Diggs. He backed down in Brooklyn. Whether folks exaggerated or not, the story stuck. And in New York, once a tale like that gets tied to your name, it lives forever. It becomes part of your legacy, whether you like it or not. Even years later, when Rod Diggs got tangled up in that heavy federal case and ended up serving life, people still talked about that club night like it was proof of who he really was. They'd say, Rod was wild, but he stood on business, even against stars. That moment became part of his legend, the day he reminded the whole industry that fame has limits, and some lines in the city just can't be crossed. For Jim Jones, that night hit like a serious wake-up call. Jim's always been a go-getter, confident, flashy, proud of where he came from, but even he couldn't ignore what that moment did to his rep in the streets. Harlem still backed him strong, no doubt, but once he stepped outside his zone, the whispers started every time he talked tough in interviews or dropped bars about being outside. Fans online would drop comments like, "But what about Rod Diggs?" And that question stuck to him like glue. It turned into the story people couldn't let go of. The wild part? Jim never addressed it, not a word. He didn't confirm it, didn't deny it, and that silence, it spoke louder than any statement. Because let's be real, if it wasn't true, someone with Jim's pride probably would have shut that talk down fast. Instead, he stayed quiet, maybe realizing some stories just don't need revisiting. Behind the scenes, those close to Jim say that night really shifted how he moved. After that, he started rolling lighter at Brooklyn events. Less flash, less entourage, more focus on business moves and music. It's like Rod's calm check became a turning point, a silent reminder that fame don't cancel consequences and respect still rules every block. Meanwhile, Rod Diggs' name kept rising. Even behind bars, he became a symbol of that real New York energy. The streets that don't chase fame, they chase integrity. Artists started name-dropping him in songs, and those who really knew him spoke on how solid he was when treated right, but how quick the tone could change if you didn't come correct. Rod's legend turned into something deeper, proof that in this city, respect will always outrank celebrity. That razor-thin balance between fear and respect, that's what made Rod Diggs stand out from everyone else. When people started dropping documentaries and interviews about old New York, this story always found its way back into the mix. The night Rod Diggs humbled Jim Jones, and not because it was about beef or ego, but because it showed something real, how pride can get checked the moment it steps outside its comfort zone. For the fans, this wasn't just street gossip, it hit deeper. It reminded everyone that the streets ain't something you rent for the night, they're something you belong to. And even now, all these years later, that one story still floats through every barbershop, every podcast, every late night convo about who's really solid. Some people say the story's been stretched, others swear they saw it happen with their own eyes. But one thing never changes, the message. No matter how big you get, there's always someone realer, quieter, and ready to test that energy if you ever forget where you came from. That night became part of New York's hip-hop legend. The night Rod Diggs reminded everyone that the streets don't bend for fame. It wasn't about clout or trying to embarrass anyone, it was about principle. Rod didn't step to Jim out of hate. He did it to keep the code alive. Because in his world, respect always came before reputation. Always. And that's a message a whole new generation needed to see for themselves. For Jim, it wasn't a total loss. It was a lesson in realness. Over time, he grew from that moment, turned more toward business, family, and legacy. The wild, impulsive Jim started fading, replaced by a version that's more calculated, more mature, and more grounded. But one thing about New York, the streets never forget, and neither do the fans. That night still echoes as proof that in this city, fame might shine bright, but respect, that's forever. Every city's got its own street legend, that one story that never dies. But this one, it just happened to involve two names big enough to echo through decades. Rod Diggs and Jim Jones, two different worlds, two different energies, colliding in a moment the city would never forget. Rod's legacy turned out complicated. Some people remember him as a rapper whose full potential never got its shine. Others see him as the last of a rare breed, a man who lived by loyalty, respect, and fearlessness. Even from behind bars, his name still gets mentioned with weight because whether you respected him or feared him, one thing was certain. Rod stood for something real. The moral of this story, you can buy jewels, cars, designer fits, followers, and fame, but you can't buy respect. That kind of respect is earned in quiet rooms when nobody's recording, in moments when pride meets presence. That's what separates image from identity, and that night in Brooklyn showed it perfectly. Rod Diggs didn't come to show off. He came to remind everyone what authenticity looks like. So yeah, The night Rod Diggs humbled Jim Jones wasn't just another story floating online. It was a moment that split Fame from Foundation. Harlem might have had the lights and the flash, but Brooklyn had the code. And when those two collided, the city saw who walked out with their respect untouched. Because in this game, whether you're a rapper, a fighter, or a boss, one rule never changes: you can't fake real. And that night, Rod Diggs didn't need a crowd or a headline to prove it. He just stood there and was. That's why the story still gets passed around today. Not because it was about Jim Jones or Rod Diggs, but because it was about what happens when real recognizes real and the whole city feels it. It was never just about fame, it was about what happens when image meets reality. Fame can lift a man so high he forgets where his feet are, but the streets, they'll always remind you exactly where you stand. Rod Diggs didn't need cameras flashing, diamond chains swinging, or viral moments to prove who he was. His presence said it all. When he stepped in a room, you felt it before he even spoke. He didn't raise his voice, didn't cause a scene. He just looked a man dead in the eyes and reminded him plain and simple: respect don't care about fame. That's the part the new generation keeps missing. It ain't about who's the loudest online or who's trending this week. It's about who still stands tall when the lights go out and the crowd's gone quiet. For Jim Jones, that night became a reality check, a moment that stripped everything down to what truly matters. You can have the money, the fame, and all the attention in the world, but once you step into another man's world, there's only one currency that counts: respect. And in that Brooklyn moment, everyone watching learned exactly what that word really means. Jim Jones learned that lesson the hard way. And whether he ever speaks on it or not, that moment became part of his story forever. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's how you accept a truth without saying a word. As for Rod Diggs, even though he's behind bars now, his legend still echoes through the city. People still talk about the way he carried himself, calm, firm, never backing down, and how his name still travels across borough lines with respect attached to it. Rod represented that real old New York energy, the kind built before clout, when your word meant everything and your actions built your reputation, not your follower count. You might not agree with every move he made, but one thing's undeniable: Rod Diggs stood on principle. He lived by a code that's fading fast in today's game, where loyalty and honor sometimes get traded for likes and trends. But let's be clear, this story ain't here to glorify the streets. It's a reminder of what hip-hop and the hustle were built on: loyalty, integrity, and discipline. The same principles that separate the real from the pretenders. Every rapper talks about respect, but few understand what it costs to earn it. And that's what makes this story timeless. It's not just another headline, it's a cautionary tale about what happens when fame forgets its foundation. So what do you think? Did Rod Diggs really remind the game what real means? Or do stories like this get bigger with time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you on the next one.